The house that kept 14 people alive through the Blackwater blizzard was not raised from pine boards, not stone, not sod. It began as rye straw swept from a barn floor and kicked into the mud by a man who thought he was throwing away trash. 3 months earlier, Elias Rook stood under a yellow kitchen lamp while his father's life was divided on a table. The lamp smoked. The window glass trembled in the autumn wind. On one side of the table sat Abram Rook, the older brother, with his vest buttoned tight and his fingers already resting near the deed box. On the other side sat Elias, his wife Mara, their 7-year-old daughter Willa, and a speckled farm dog named Juniper pressed against Willa's skirt. Gideon Rook had worked 34 years to build that place out near the Loop River. He had hauled limestone for the spring house. He had planted cottonwoods along the north fence. He had dug a well deep enough to find cold water even in August. And when the reading ended, Abram received the house, the barn, the well, the wheat in the granary, the milk cows, the ox team, and every acre that could reliably grow a crop. Elias received a blind mare, a wagon with one cracked wheel, a dry quarter section west of Blackwater Draw, and $18 in silver. Abram slid the coins across the table with 2 fingers, enough for a man who never learned what land is worth. Willa looked at the coins, then at the room she had slept in since birth. "Are we not staying here?" Mara's hand tightened around her shoulder. Elias did not answer his brother. He gathered the coins. Then he took one thing that had not been listed in the estate papers. His father's field book, rainfall, frost dates, feed weight, notes about wind, soil, fuel, and every hard winter Gideon Rook had survived by paying attention. Elias held that worn book under his arm and stepped out of the warm kitchen. Outside, the prairie was already going dark. By morning, the Rook family was on the road west. The blind mare pulled slowly. The wagon leaned with every rut. Juniper trotted beside Willa as if the dog understood that nobody else had been assigned to guard the child. From a rise, they could still see Abram's new inheritance in the distance. Smoke from the chimney. Wheat stacked under cover. The barn roof straight and black against the sky. The well house standing solid beside the yard. Then the road bent, and all of it disappeared. Blackwater Draw did not look like land waiting to be claimed. It looked like the place good land had been scraped away from. The soil was sandy in the low places and stony on the rises. The grass came thin and gray. A few buffalo berry bushes leaned sideways from years of wind. No cabin stood there, no well, no windbreak, not even a proper shed. Elias climbed down and walked the boundary until the sun started to fall. Mara watched him from the wagon. How far to town? 7 miles. How much lumber can $18 buy? Elias looked at the empty ground. Not enough. That answer followed them into the first cold night. They slept in the wagon with a canvas thrown over the bows. Wind slid under the edges anyway. Willa's teeth clicked until Juniper crawled against her legs and refused to move. Before dawn, Elias opened his father's book by lantern light. One sentence had been written in the margin twice. Wind steals whatever it can touch. He read it once, then again. At sunrise, he tried to build anyway. First, he drove to Gant's Crossing and stood in the lumberyard while a clerk counted boards, nails, tar paper, hinges, and stovepipe. A cabin small enough for 3 people came to $146 before the roof was even finished. Elias had 18. The clerk folded the list and handed it back like a funeral notice. Next came sod, There were settlers who had cut houses straight from the earth, stacking the prairie itself into walls. But the ground at Blackwater broke wrong. The roots were too shallow. The sand ran through his fingers. When Elias lifted a block the size of a bread loaf, it split clean down the middle and fell apart at his boots. Willa stared at it. "Can we make smaller ones?" Elias tried. Smaller ones broke, too. Water was worse. A strip of greener grass near the draw hinted at moisture below. Elias dug half a day with a short spade. Sand caved into the hole before he reached anything damp. He climbed out with raw hands and a back that felt older than his father's had looked in the coffin. The first visitor arrived the next afternoon. Silas Creed, the best carpenter between Gant's Crossing and the river, rode up slowly and did not laugh. That made him harder to dismiss. He inspected the wagon, the mare, the failed sod cuts, the empty claim. Then he looked at Willa sitting in the shade of the wagon wheel with Juniper's head in her lap. "A child needs walls before the first north storm," Silas said. "I know. Proper walls. Studs, bracing, paper. Pitch to shed snow. I know." Silas removed his hat and rubbed the crease above his brow. "Sell the quarter to Abram. He has already been asking." The words were not cruel. That almost made them worse. "Take the money, rent a back room in town, work the winter. Try again when spring can help you." Mara said nothing. Elias looked across the claim, where the wind moved through grass so thin it barely had anything to bend. Silas put his hat back on. "Pride will not warm that girl." The carpenter rode away before Elias could decide whether the sentence was advice or judgment. That night, Mara cut old canvas into strips and stitched the torn wagon cover by lamplight. Willa slept with Juniper curled against her. Elias sat outside with the field book open on his knees. The pages smelled faintly of dust and wood smoke. His father's notes were not poetry. They were numbers. March thaw late. North wind 4 days. Coal gone by 10th night. Straw loft warmer than plank room. Calves survived under packed rye. Elias stopped on that line. Straw loft warmer than plank room. The next morning he drove back to the Rook farm. Abram was outside the barn, directing 2 hired men as they repaired a gate. The yard looked exactly as it always had, except every familiar object now seemed to stand behind Abram like a witness. "I need straw," Elias said. Abram looked at the cracked wagon. "For feed? For building." One of the hired men lowered his hammer. Abram smiled slowly. "You lost the house and now you want to build one from sweepings. I will pay what I can." Elias held out the $18, though he already knew he could not spend all of it. Abram looked at the money and laughed through his nose. "The good straw is mine. The cattle are mine. The granary is mine. Father left you the west sand because even he knew it was useless." He turned and kicked at a heap near the back of the barn. Old rye straw, damp along the edges. Some of it crushed. Some streaked with mud, the kind swept out after threshing and left for bedding or rot. "There," Abram said, "take what the rats have not claimed." Willa sat beside the wagon and heard every word. Juniper stood and gave one low growl. Elias did not defend himself. He did not threaten. He did not beg. He loaded every bundle Abram had pointed to, one by one. At first, the hired men smirked. After a while, they stopped, because the work took too long to stay funny. When the wagon finally rolled away, Abram called after him. "Build it high enough, Elias. Maybe the wind will carry the whole thing back when you come to your senses." Elias kept the mare moving. But beside the field book, in the wagon bed, The ruined straw no longer looked like waste. It looked like a question. That night, at Blackwater, the wind came down cold and restless. Elias split a piece of rye straw lengthwise with his pocket knife. The lantern showed the hollow stem. Tiny walls inside the stalk, tiny chambers that held air. He split another, then another. His father had written about wind stealing what it could touch. But this was different. Air trapped inside straw was air the wind could not reach. Still air, not wood, not earth, not pride, still air. Mara woke when she heard him moving. "Are you counting straw?" "I am counting what is inside it." She stared at him until the meaning settled. Then she looked at Willa, asleep under patched canvas, and did not ask whether the idea was normal. She asked the only question that mattered. "Will it stand?" Elias turned the hollow stem between his fingers. "I do not know." Mara nodded once. "At least we know what the wagon will do." By morning, Elias had drawn the plan in the dust, 16 feet by 20. Thick walls, straw packed flat, not loose, corners pinned with split willow and cedar stakes. Rawhide straps where the bales wanted to spread. Clay plaster on both sides. A gravel trench around the base so rain could not sit against the wall. A low stone skirt to keep mice from working straight into the straw. It did not look like any house Silas Creed would have built. It looked like a bet made against winter. Work began before doubt could grow teeth. Elias hauled every ruined bundle from Abram's barn. Then he gathered more from farms where old bedding straw had been left behind sheds. He paid with labor because money was already too precious to bleed. He mended a roof, cleaned a chicken house, dug post holes until his palms opened. Mara traded sewing for ash, rawhide, and a cracked iron kettle. She mixed clay with sand and chopped blue grama until the plaster held together like tough bread dough. Willa collected dry grass and sorted straight willow switches into piles. Juniper contributed string, bones, and, once, proudly, a dead mouse she seemed certain was part of the construction. Word reached Gant's Crossing by the end of the week. Elias Rook was building a house out of barn sweepings. The name arrived soon after. Rook's Rat Nest. Abram used it first at the store. Then Teamsters repeated it. Then children repeated the Teamsters. By October, men standing around Gant's stove were placing bets on which would happen first. The wind tearing the roof off, the straw rotting black, or mice carrying the walls away one mouthful at a time. Elias heard most of it. He built anyway. Layer by layer, the walls rose. The straw was not stacked the way hay sat in a field. Elias laid the bundles flat and crossed the seams so no straight path ran through the wall. Every few layers, he drove stakes down through the mass until his shoulders shook from the blows. Corners were cinched tight with rawhide that dried hard as bone. When Silas Creed returned, he did not dismount right away. He studied the half-built walls. Then he stepped down, walked to the north side, placed both hands against the straw, and shoved. Nothing moved. He pushed harder. The wall held. Silas stepped back. For one brief moment, his face betrayed interest. Then caution returned. Standing in October is not the same as standing in January. Elias wiped dust from his sleeve. No. Silas looked toward Willa, who was packing chopped grass into a bucket with both hands. Do not let proof arrive too late. That sentence stayed with Elias longer than the first one had. Because 2 days later, the rain came. It was not a dramatic storm. No thunder, no lightning. Just a cold, patient rain that fell all afternoon and into the night. By morning, the weakness had appeared. The clay on the west wall cracked in long, pale lines. Near the bottom, where water had settled against the base, the plaster pulled back from the straw. Elias touched it and felt dampness where dampness should never have been. Then Juniper began scratching at the corner. Elias peeled loose clay away. Tiny bite marks ran through the exposed straw. Mice. For the first time, the idea looked foolish even to him. Not because others had laughed. Because Winter did not care who was right in theory. He spent that day changing the house instead of defending it. The trench went deeper. Gravel from the draw filled the bottom. Flat stones made a skirt along the walls. The plaster changed. Less clay, more sand, more ash, more chopped grass. Mara pressed the new mix into the cracks while Elias sealed the sill with rawhide and mud until no bright straw showed near the ground. The repairs cost him 3 days. Then came the debt. A stovepipe, nails, flour, salt, lamp oil, and a sack of beans did not sound like much until Harlan Gant opened his account book and wrote each item under Elias Rook's name. Harlan was not unkind. He was a storekeeper. Numbers were his native language. Abram offered $75 for your quarter, he said. Elias said nothing. That pays your account. Leaves enough for rent through the worst of it. You could work for him until spring. From the stove, a man murmured, better than freezing inside livestock bedding. A few others laughed. Harlan did not. February changes what a man believes he can endure. Elias looked at the ledger, then at the goods on the counter, then at his own father's field book under his arm. No. Harlan dipped the pen and made another mark. Then I hope straw is as clever as you think it is. Outside, the wind snapped dust across the street. Elias loaded the stovepipe into the wagon and drove home with everyone's certainty behind him. By the first week of November, the Rook house had a roof. Cottonwood poles spanned the walls. Brush and old canvas lay across them. A thin cap of sod held everything down. The outside plaster dried in rough, uneven planes, patched darker where ash had been added after the rain. The door hung crooked, but it closed. Inside, Mara made a room from almost nothing. A table from crate boards, a curtain from old flour sacks, a bed platform raised off the ground, a shelf for the field book, a nail beside the door for the cracked thermometer Silas had loaned, perhaps because he still expected to read the failure himself. On the first hard frost, Elias woke before sunrise and checked the glass. Outside, 19 degrees. Inside, 38. No fire had burned since midnight. It was not comfort. It was evidence. He wrote it down. November 9, outside 19. Inside 38. No fire. North wall dry. Mara read the entry over his shoulder. Your father would have measured the same thing. Elias looked at Gideon's old handwriting on the facing page. He would have measured more. So he did. Each morning and evening he recorded outside temperature, inside temperature, wind, fuel burned, wall condition, and any dampness near the base. The numbers began to build a defense where words could not. Soon the house was doing something every critic had missed. It was slowing the world down. Wind that screamed across the draw arrived inside as a murmur. Cold that knifed under wagon canvas had to pass through thick-packed straw, trapped air, plaster, and more straw before it reached Willa's blanket. The first true north blow came before Thanksgiving. The roof canvas snapped loose at one corner. Elias climbed out with rawhide strips while the wind pushed him sideways across the sod cap. His hands went numb before he could knot the strap. Inside, the stove burned sage and buffalo chips. Outside, The thermometer fell to 11 degrees. Inside, it stayed at 46. Willa watched her father write the number. Is the wind getting in? Elias placed his palm on the wall. It was cool. The air beside it was not enough to matter. Those 5 words were the first time hope sounded like a measurement. Abram rode out 2 days later. He arrived with the satisfied expression of a man expecting entertainment. Snow dusted the shoulders of his coat. His horse steamed in the cold. From outside, the house still looked ridiculous. Low, thick, uneven. Its plaster patched in 3 colors. Its roofline more stubborn than elegant. Abram stepped through the door and paused. The room was not warm the way his farmhouse kitchen was warm. But it was warmer than outside, he noticed. Then he chose not to. A rat nest can fool a family for a month, he said. Willa lowered her eyes. Juniper rose between them and gave one soft growl. Elias did not answer the insult. He opened the field book and turned it toward Abram. Numbers filled the page. Abram glanced at them. Figures do not stop winter. No, Elias said. Then he looked at the wall, but walls might. Abram's jaw worked once. He handed the book back and left before the room could make him stay any longer. Halfway to his horse, he looked over his shoulder. This time, he studied the house instead of laughing at it. December hardened the prairie. At Gant's Crossing, wood piles sank faster than expected. Coal sacks thinned. Families in frame shacks stuffed rags into cracks and still woke to ice inside their water pails. At Blackwater, the Rooks burned less fuel than anyone believed. That angered some people more than failure would have. Failure would have confirmed the world as they understood it. Instead, Elias Rook's walls kept offering small, stubborn contradictions. Outside, 0. Inside, 48. Outside, 8 below. Inside, 51 with 1 pan of fuel. North wall dry, base stones holding. No mouse sign. Mara began keeping water in a covered crock near the inside wall. It did not freeze. Willa stopped asking when they were going back to Abram's house. One evening, while arranging her blanket, she called the straw place our house. Mara turned toward the stove quickly so the child would not see her face. Elias heard it. He wrote nothing about that in the field book. Some measurements were too large for numbers. January gave them confidence. February came to collect it. The storm announced itself first by silence. On the morning of February 6, the prairie did not move. No bird crossed the draw. No loose grass rattled near the door. The sky pressed low and gray, the color of old iron left in snow. Silas Creed rode past before noon to check fence lines and stopped only long enough to say the barometer in town had fallen like a dropped stone. By mid-afternoon, the north arrived. Not as wind, as force. Snow shot sideways across Blackwater Draw. The first gust shook the roof hard enough to drop dust from the rafters. The second gust came lower, pressing against the north wall as if an invisible animal had thrown its shoulder into the house. Elias moved without hurry because hurry wasted heat. He checked the door gasket, pressed fresh mud into a hairline gap near the roof, set fuel closer to the stove, moved Willa's bedroll away from the entrance. Mara heated water and wrapped Willa's feet in warmed cloth. Juniper stood at the door, ears rigid, listening to a world that had become mostly sound. The temperature fell all afternoon. 17. 9. 2 below. By dark, the outside glass read 16 below 0. Inside, 52. Elias wrote the numbers with stiff fingers. Then a gust struck so hard that Willa cried out, "Is it going to break?" Elias listened. Not to the wind. to the house. A frame wall would have rattled and complained through every joint. The straw wall did something else. It accepted the pressure and spread it through its thick body. It did not ring. It did not shudder. It simply stood there, heavy with air the wind could not steal. "No," he said. His hand rested against the plaster. "It has weight now." The first knock came some time after midnight. It was so faint, Elias almost missed it. Juniper did not. The dog exploded toward the door, barking so hard, Mara grabbed Willa to keep her from waking in terror. Elias lifted the latch and pulled the door inward. Cold slammed into the room. Silas Creed stood outside with snow packed into his beard. Behind him was his wife, Ruth, carrying a little boy wrapped in a quilt stiff with ice. Their frame house still stood. That was not the problem. The wind had found every crack. The stove could not keep up. Their youngest had stopped shivering, which Silas knew was worse than shivering. Elias pulled them in. No one spoke about pride. No one spoke about advice. The door closed, and the storm vanished back outside. An hour later, Juniper barked again. This time, Abram Rook stood in the blowing snow with his wife and 2 sons behind him. For a moment, Elias could not make the picture fit. Abram's farmhouse had the good lumber, the good stove, the deep well, the windbreak their father planted with his own hands. But snow had blown under the kitchen door and along the floorboards. Ice had formed inside the milk pans. Part of the granary roof had buckled under drifted snow. Abram's youngest boy had blue lips and a cough that sounded too thin. Abram stepped forward, then stopped with one boot still outside. The old certainty was gone from his face. Words tried to form. None of them mattered. Elias grabbed the front of Abram's coat and hauled him through the door. The rat nest made room. By morning, there were 14 people inside the straw house. Every inch mattered. Wet coats hung away from the walls. Children sat near the center. The stove received fuel in careful handfuls. The door opened only when necessary and never without a plan. More bodies brought warmth. More bodies also used air, water, and fuel. Elias recalculated everything. Outside, the storm drove the temperature lower than anyone in the room had seen. 24 below, 28. At dawn on the second day, 31 below. Inside, the thermometer hovered between 46 and 50. Not warm. Alive. That was the difference the walls had been built to protect. Abram sat near the table with his hands wrapped around a tin cup he had not lifted in several minutes. His eyes kept moving to the plaster, to the thick sill, to the field book, to the stove burning less fuel than his farmhouse had swallowed in an hour. Finally, he spoke without looking at Elias. "What did you put inside them?" Elias almost laughed, not because the question was funny, because the answer had been visible from the beginning. Air. Abram looked up. Elias tapped the wall. Straw holds it still. Plaster keeps the wind from reaching it. Stone keeps water from spoiling it. Silas, exhausted and pale, leaned forward as if every word had become a board measurement. How much ash in the second plaster? More than I wanted. Less than the wall wanted. For the first time since the estate table, Abram said nothing that could be used as a weapon. The blizzard lasted nearly 3 days. When the wind finally dropped, silence filled the house so completely that Willa whispered. Outside, the world had been remade. Fence lines vanished. Drifts climbed over the low windows. The draw was a white scar between buried slopes. A dead branch from the cottonwood windbreak had punched into Abram's granary roof and disappeared under snow. The thermometer outside read 34 below zero before the sun lifted enough to soften the number. Inside, it read 47. Everyone had survived. Silas stood by the north wall for a long time before leaving. He pressed both hands against the plaster the way he had back in October. This time he did not push to test it. He was listening. 16 by 20? He asked. Elias nodded. Staked every third course, every other near the corners. Silas looked toward Ruth and the sleeping child wrapped in a blanket on the floor. Then he asked for the mixture again, not as a warning, as instruction. The road to Gant's Crossing opened 2 days later. By the end of the week, men who had laughed around the stove were walking out to Blackwater Draw to study the drainage trench. They asked about ash, about chopped grass, about whether the straw had to be rye, about how wide the walls should be, about whether a shed could be built the same way, then a wash house, then a storm room. Elias answered each question. He did not charge for what winter had taught him. Abram came last. He stood outside the house with his hat in his hands, staring at the patched wall that had held his children through the storm. For a long time, neither brother spoke. At last, Abram said, "Father would have understood it." Elias looked at the field book on the shelf inside the doorway. He wrote enough for someone to start. Abram nodded, though it did not repair what had been done. Some losses do not vanish because a man finally sees clearly. But from that spring on, nobody in Gant's Crossing called the house Rook's Rat Nest in Elias's hearing. Not because the name disappeared, because the laughter did. By harvest, 3 straw houses stood along Blackwater Draw. By the next winter, 5 families had built stone skirts, ash plaster, and thick straw walls of their own. Silas Creed helped frame roofs for 2 of them and never again told a poor man that lumber was the only way to keep a child warm. Elias kept recording numbers until Gideon's field book was full. Fuel saved across ordinary nights. Wall cracks repaired before rain. Mice blocked by stone. Children sleeping through north winds that once would have chased them from bed before dawn. The proof did not arrive as one miracle. It arrived as winter after winter of fires that burned lower, walls that stayed dry, and families that woke alive. Years later, when Willa was grown, she would remember the storm less than the morning after it. Her father standing in the doorway, snow higher than the window ledge, the little cracked thermometer beside him, and the wall at his back, made from what another man had thrown away. Elias closed his father's field book that morning, not like a man who had won an argument, but like a man who had finally understood one. Wind steals whatever it can touch, so he built a house around what it could not.